a topic that you will often hear among clergy or at various seminars and gatherings that include clergy or people who are interested in church and church growth, is how do people move forward on their spiritual journeys, on what some call the journey of discipleship and others a journey of spiritual awakening. And often in these discussions I will hear one or another of the elements that I believe contribute to that. And people tend to lead with what they most love, and I lead with prayer usually. I mean, this is a service of prayer that was started precisely because of seeing a need for just prayer and in our community. The other elements, of course, are learning about scripture for sure, and other spiritual material. And the third thread is generosity. That can look like service in all its many forms, but the true generosity of a transforming spiritual journey is the giving because we can't not give. And so it comes very much from the heart. The model that I've just talked to you about also includes a binding together of these threads by the bonds of community. Without that, we don't have the companions on the journey that we need in order to move forward. This is not a journey that's ever done in isolation. Even the desert mothers and fathers who appeared to be very isolated also had community as well. This model, we find it in the Gospels. Jesus's disciples followed him and learned from him to pray. And they learned to pray the way Jesus prayed. They heard about and learned to teach this kingdom of heaven, this upside downness of a vision that Jesus saw. And they practiced generosity by healing the sick and by feeding the hungry. And they did all of this woven into a very small and tight community, a community that had to have had as much friction as any group of people can have. Among others were included a disciple who was a zealot and a disciple who was a tax collector. The zealots were freedom fighters, and they believed in violence to overthrow the Roman occupation. The tax collectors, like Matthew, were viewed as collaborators and thought to be worthy of death. And these are the differences that Jesus held at his table as he knit this community together, which might give us pause when we think the red and the blue is a difficulty in our country. There is a phrase that I learned recently from Lindsay Cox, who is our resident Hebrew scholar. And she explained to me that in the Hebrew tradition, there is this idea of the disciples that follow the rabbi being covered in the dust of the rabbi. It's a metaphor for complete and intimate discipleship. A follower follows so closely that they emulate the rabbi or the teacher in every detail of their life. And the idea is they follow so closely that the dust kicked up by the feet of the rabbi covers them, to be covered in the dust of the rabbi. It reminds me of a passage from the Gospel of Thomas, which is not a gospel of the New Testament, but is an early Christian writing, saying 108, Jesus said, "When you drink from my mouth, you shall become like me. I myself shall become you, and the hidden things will be revealed to you." To drink from Jesus' mouth, not just his words, but his every action, to become like Christ. We heard a passage tonight from Matthew chapter 19, verse 21, where Jesus has this young man come to him and say, I adhere to the law. I practice everything that a good Jew should practice. And clearly the man is feeling some sense that there is more. And so he asks Jesus, what do I need to do to be perfect? And Jesus answers, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. while that act of generosity he wants him to start with is pretty big, to give everything up, I think the harder command is then, come, follow me. And we hear it throughout the Gospels, these people who literally dropped their whole lives, left their families, left their jobs, and followed the rabbi. How this might look today, I can tell you, it takes many forms. I can speak specifically to the ministries that I oversee because I see the people come into those ministries and I see what happens as they engage more and more. Not the only path offered here at Cathedral, but one I'm very familiar with. So someone might start by attending this service, adding prayer practices to their other spiritual practices, not just here, but I know many of you who come here have very strong practices of prayer and meditation in your lives. And then someone might become interested in understanding more about, say, the mystics of the Christian tradition, and might choose to come to the contemplative book study, where we can learn by talking with each other and reasoning through some of these scriptures and some of these theological ideas. And then what I see is people's hearts open up and they move into some kind of giving or service. And the one I can see is the Care Collective. It's a new ministry in our church. We're offering loving community to people who are living with memory loss. And when they are with us, their caregivers have a time of respite in order to take a breath, to rest, to tend to their own self-care. For the handful that I see personally active in 2 or even 3 of these ministries, I see the change. It happens rather quickly as people's spiritual lives become unfolded before them. The change is unmistakable. To be covered in the dust of the rabbi is to have transformation in our lives.